dude, you got to be honest. It is the West and Zelensky who are having success at getting Trump to change his position and move over into them. And honestly, this is starting to look like Joe Biden-lite. What Trump is doing is radically different than what he campaigned on and what he said so emphatically in the early part of his young second term already. Now he's starting to sound more like Biden. And that should trouble everybody for a whole bunch of reasons. But let's continue on here because it's about to get a little bit worse. Rubio was also talking and asked about this issue. You may recall that there was, for the third time in this administration, that there was a pause put in the weapons deliveries, intelligence sharings, and several other things, but then they went back on. So the question was, in this last one, and this is a little over a week ago, you had Ambassador Whitaker say, listen, this is America first. We got to put our needs first. We can't keep giving stuff to somebody else and we don't have enough. And then Sean Parnell came on for the DOD spokesman, came out and emphasized a little bit more strongly. We've done an analysis and we have to make sure that what we give is not going to cause a problem with what we have at our security. This is America first. This is what it looks like, he said. And so they asked Rubio, is there a shortage on interceptor missiles?
Not because there is a shortage, but because it's prudent to look at it and say, okay, do we have enough of these in our stockpiles for all of our obligations around the world, both in defense of our bases in the Middle East, but also our obligations to our Indo-Pacific partners and any other contingencies that might arise. But in the end, I would say that the overwhelming majority of defense of military aid that the United States provides Ukraine has never been paused and continues along the same schedules that it's been. I think there's a broader issue unrelated to the pause, and that involves the defense productive capabilities of the West, not just us, but of Europe. As an example, one of the things that the Ukrainians need is more Patriot batteries. There are Patriot batteries available in multiple countries in Europe, yet no one wants to part with them. So I hope that'll change.
So we could have pulled up here for review on May the 20th, where, again, Rubio went to Senate testimony and said, we're not giving up any of these things, folks. We just don't have them. And he said, now, there's others in Europe that do, and we'll talk about that. But he said, May 20th, we don't have them. We don't have any to give. That's what he said on the record and Senate testimony. But now then, here we have last night, after emphatically, in fact, actually, before I get to that, earlier this week, Trump was 2 times asked about this by 2 separate reporters at different venues about this on again, off again, pause, unpause situation. And he was asked, who made that decision? And you saw one he mocked and said, will you tell me? And then the other ones, he just didn't answer. And it was pretty clear that if you're not given the answer, who is? And Trump said, well, it would have been me. I'm the only one that can do it. But that's not answering the question. So there's an additional issue of who's actually in charge, who is running the show in the Pentagon, in the State Department, at the administration, because Trump seems to be like someone's informing him after the fact of something that's happened. So let's throw that in the mix too, because that just makes it a little bit more troubling. But so we had Marco Rubio going from May 20th saying we don't have interceptor missiles to give. And then you have on July the 1st and 2nd, you have, and 2nd and 3rd, you had American UN ambassadors. You had the chief spokesman for the DOD saying, we've done this analysis. We have to make sure we don't get below this time here. And then now last night on NBC News, after a phone conversation with the president, NBC News, Kristen Welker drops this bombshell.
The president said he's disappointed in Russia and told us he thinks he'll have a major statement to make about Russia on Monday. Though when pressed, he did not say what that statement will be. The president also said he just made a deal today with NATO in which he says the U.S. will send weapons to Ukraine through NATO, and NATO is, quote, paying for those weapons 100%, including the Patriot air defenses that Ukraine has been asking for, and that NATO will distribute them.
Look, it doesn't matter who pays for them. I mean, it would be, if you're going to give something away, it's great if somebody else pays for it. Sure, why not? But in overall terms, especially in terms of the defense budget, et cetera, it's a relatively small number, even though the missiles per se by themselves are quite expensive in a per unit cost. And when you're talking about the whole overall DoD budget, it's a very small portion. So to get someone else to pay for it, that's cool, I suppose, but it doesn't really change anything. But what matters a lot is how many there are. And there are clearly plenty of people that are saying that have been in, whether it's been leaked information in the U.S. press or just common sense. We are low on these because consider, I mean, we've had from February 2022 up to the end of the Biden administration given tons of these missiles, hundreds of them, probably in the thousands that have been given. We've been given Patriot batteries, and then we've given the interceptors that go along with those. Then after the Trump administration came in, there was no change to that. We continued to let flow whatever was going on there. So whatever had already been agreed to, we're continuing to send that off. Then you had the Red Sea issue, where the U.S. was trying to quell the Houthis in the Red Sea, which burned up a bunch of interceptors at sea and in the air to try and keep the shipping lanes open, which we finally ended up stopping. We had twice in 2024 under the Biden administration, we physically helped intercept incoming Iranian missiles from Israel. Then now Trump did the same thing here. And then all of a sudden, this so-called 12-day war between Iran and Israel, again, we provided a ton of missiles for both the Israeli Iron Dome system, their integrated air defense system, as well as our assets personally engaging also in intercepting those missiles. So you've had a huge drop in them. Now here comes Zelensky, for months now, has been begging for more interceptor missiles, more Patriot batteries, etc. And even the batteries per se is not the biggest issue. There are limitations on that. But the much bigger issue is the interceptor missiles themselves, which apply across the board. So there is no question that there are fewer of them today than there we have. That there is clearly, by senior Pentagon officials, are sounding the alarm bells that we're below what we need if we get into a war. That we have to have a certain number, and even that, and I think that number that they've used, I think evidence indicates that number that they have set as the ceiling for how many we can give away is too low. It needs to be a lot higher, because as this war shows, the Russia-Ukraine war, and even the Israeli-Iranian war for that matter, shows that in the modern age right now, the side that has the most air defense, offensive and defensive missiles is going to have the best chances to succeed. And if you have insufficient numbers of either and your opponent does, then look at Kiev, because that's exactly what's the case there. They have some, they don't have enough. Russia has more offensive missiles than Ukraine is going to ever be able to produce in defensive interceptors. So this number by itself, even just looking at what's been asked for, is insufficient to change the dynamic that's already decisively in Russia's advantage. That's one thing. But now then to ignore that and ignore that it's not going to make any difference in this conflict, you're actually now drawing down our own inventory. And we know, because this is open source information, and I've seen it, I've had it confirmed by those on the inside that know, we're producing around 600 missiles per year. That is not a fraction of enough. And you see, Russia's launching 500-700 almost every night, every other night practically. Apparently, they're going to go higher than that. We can expect that to continue on, according to open sources. So these missiles, there's just not enough of them, period. Point blank, end of story. And if you continue to give them, even though our production capacity is too low, then what does that tell you about the inventory? There's only one other place you can get it. Whoever pays for it doesn't really matter. That's the bottom line. We don't have enough to go around for others and ourselves. So you, by going down this path, this is another thing to throw in the problem category here. You're putting American national security at risk, because if we get into an unexpected conflict somewhere, we will not have enough air defense interceptor missiles for our own national security. Understand that. That is a fact. We simply don't have enough. If we get into a sustained conflict, we can maybe do well for a number of weeks, but we don't have the capacity to start cranking those things out like the Russians do, like apparently the Chinese do, who apparently learned this lesson without having to go to war. But the Russians, because they went to war. We have been watching both, and we still haven't changed it. So that is a problem that we have here. But look, Trump seems to be focused on other things. He's focused on, and you saw it a little bit there. He's angry at Putin, and what was relayed there by Kristen Welker. He's angry at Putin, and he's not happy with him at all. And why would he expect any different outcome? Because again, going back to that July 3rd phone call with Putin, you had Trump saying that he was not happy with the phone call. He said before, because Trump, according to the readout on both sides, he was asking him for, again, an unconditional ceasefire. Why would you think that Russia's going to say yes? Now, you've seen Keith Kellogg and you've seen the Secretary of Defense Hegseth. They both have appeared over the last couple of months, especially, emphatically said that the force of personality of President Trump can get things done that Joe Biden couldn't, or any other president for that matter. The force of personality. I fear that Trump may have heard that and listened to it and believed it, and just thought, I'm going to call, even though all the fundamentals are against me, but because Secretary of Defense Hegseth and Keith Kellogg said that I have this force of personality that can change things, I can. And so I'm going to go in with this phone call with Putin here on July 3rd. I thought it was odd at the time. Why would you ask for that? Why would you ask for something that you know you're not going to get? I didn't understand it, but I don't know. I guess it doesn't hurt to ask. But the predictable instead happened, and Putin very politely, apparently, according to Trump, said, no, we're not going to do that. As you saw the readout there we put up just a second ago. They say our core conditions have not changed and will not change. And so, but Trump wanted to change. Well, he did. He got mad about it. And this is what he said. Here's how he's considering Putin now.
We get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
Do you want to sanction him? Lindsey Graham has a sanctions bill on Russia. Do you want him to move ahead with that?
I'm looking at it, yeah. No, I'm looking. The Senate is passing and passed a very, very tough sanctions bill. Yeah, I'm looking at it.
And you'd sign that?
It's an optional bill. It's totally at my option. They passed it totally at my option, and to terminate totally at my option. And I'm looking at it very strongly.
So that was 3 days ago. And you saw in that Kristen Welker soundbite I played a second ago where she quoted him as saying, there's some big announcement to be made on Monday. I actually checked his Truth Social just before we came on air here to see if he had any more information on that. Nothing so far. But he's teasing this big announcement to come on Monday. Well, he's already said he's going to start giving interceptor missiles, so that's not what he's going to say. And you got to wonder, what else is he going to say? Is there some new breakthrough in positive? Seems pretty unlikely, especially given that he says this whole BS issue here, and he said last night that he's still angry with Putin. I think the more likely situation is what he said 3 days ago on the 8th, which is, I'm seriously considering this sanctions bill. And who's been pushing this sanctions bill harder than anyone is Lindsey Graham. And we've shown you sound bites really all throughout this year. Many times he's just been begging and pleading for a sound bite. And understand that these guys are golfing buddies. This picture here from just a few days ago that is on Trump's Truth Social, he was wishing happy birthday to Lindsey Graham, and here they are on the golf course. So this is something they do all the time. So this guy's talking all the time about wanting sanctions and pleading to get them. Well, obviously, he's going to be doing that on the golf course too when they were going to be talking about this. And as a matter of fact, also yesterday, there was a number of both, Senator Graham included, Senator Blumenthal, and a number of other members of Congress are just aching to get more sanctions thrown on Russia.
July is going to be the magic month for bone-crushing sanctions on Vladimir Putin. He better get ready, because his economy, already on its heels, is going to be hit hard by these sanctions.
It's very important we change the game with Putin. He's not responding in a positive way. President Trump has earnestly reached out to Putin. I applaud his efforts to end this brutal bloodbath in Ukraine. But it takes willing partners. Ukraine has been willing, Putin has not.
There's definitely bipartisan support on it. We will. What Lindsey and myself and the leader want to make sure is that we're not getting ahead of the president and the State Department.
So far, I think you'll find in the Senate broad support for Ukraine. I think the president trying to be a mediator just simply hasn't had the success that all of us hoped he would have. Now it's time to face the fact that Mr. Putin wants war. He has no intentions of stopping, as many of us have said from day one.
So Putin has no intention of stopping war. He wants it. That's what we've been saying from day one. He just wants to go on. That's the mantra that we're talking about. You see Lindsey Graham there. So, well, I applaud the president for trying. So, again, kind of a version of that force of personality. He tried to give him an off-ramp, but that poor Putin, he just wouldn't take it. He had a chance, and now then we're going to bring as Senator Blumenthal said, the bone-crushing sanctions on. Okay, first of all, let's unpack a little bit of that. Bone-crushing sanctions. Who was it? Somebody, I can't think of. Oh, yeah, Biden And on the first couple of days of the war, actually before the war, he said he was going to bring crippling sanctions. That was the phrase of the day back then, that we're going to just crush their economy and just bring it to its knees. Apparently, that's what he told Putin behind the scenes in June of 2021, that if you attacked into Ukraine, that's what we're going to do. We kind of tried that. And now then, Russia has made itself sanctions proof. And for Blumenthal to sit there and say, yeah, the Russian economy is already on its heels. Is it really? The Russian economy is on its heels. That grew 4% last year, 4.3 the year before, something like that. It's expected to do less than that this year because it does have inflation. So that's certainly something that they don't like, and so they've downplayed a little bit, or they put down their expectations of how much growth they're going to have. So it's going to be less than 4% this year, according to them. But that is nothing compared to what our economy is doing. Remember, in the previous quarter, we had negative growth. We're hoping to get back into positive growth and eke back into a plus. Otherwise, we're going to officially and technically be in a recession. And you've seen, and many of our guests on this week from Europe especially has said, listen, many of the European countries are already in recession, and many of them others are at danger of going in there. The bloc as a whole is an anemic 0.5% growth. So you want to say that Russia at last year, 4% growth is on its heels, and just, boy, this little bit more? That's self-delusion, folks. That is just, you're fooling yourself. It's embarrassing, because the evidence is out there in open source. It's not hard for anybody to see.